The far horizon drifted through the darkness between stars like a metal ghost, its running lights dimmed too. Conserve power. Captain Myra Veal sat in the command chair, her boots propped against the console, watching the sensor display with a kind of bored patience that came from 20 years of salvaging other people's disasters. Got something, came the voice from navigation. Weak signal, low power, but it's not debris. Myra swung her boots down and leaned forward. Define not debris. The navigator, a woman named Wren with scars across her knuckles and a permanent squint, pointed at the secondary display. It's a ship, big one, freighter class. Maybe drifting. Dead. Near enough. Life support is cycling at minimum. No engine output, no communications. Wren paused. But the cargo bays are pressurized. Myra felt the familiar pull in her chest, the one that said this is where things get complicated. She'd learned to trust that pull. It had kept her alive through 37 salvage operations, 2 pirate attacks, and 1 very bad decision involving a Vithari tax collector. Take us in, she said, full stealth. Approach, I want to know who's home before they know we're coming. The far horizon maneuvered toward the derelict, its hull blending with the void. As they drew closer, the ship's shape resolved on the main viewer, a Vithari design, all sharp angles and dark plating, the kind of vessel used for long-haul cargo, runs through syndicate-controlled space. Vithari registry, Wren confirmed, but the transponder is offline. Someone wanted to disappear. Myra nodded slowly, or they wanted whatever's inside to stay hidden. She assembled a boarding team herself. Wren, 2 engineers, and a security specialist named Taggart, who carried a pulse rifle like it was an extension of his arm. They cycled through the airlock and crossed the void between ships, magnetic boots clanking against the derelict's hull. The freighter's main airlock opened without resistance. That was the first wrong thing. Inside, the corridors were dark, lit only by emergency strips that flickered with the dying pulse of the ship's power core. The air was thin but breathable, recycled too many times, carrying the metallic taste of failing systems. Signs of struggle, Taggart muttered, pointing at scorch marks along the walls. Pulse fire, close range. Recent. Hours, maybe a day. Myra's hand drifted to her sidearm. Spread out, keep comms open. They moved through the ship in pairs, clearing compartments that were either empty or filled with debris. Crates of unidentifiable cargo, broken equipment, the scattered remains of what might have been a crew's quarters. Then Wren's voice crackled over the comm, Captain, you need to see this. Myra followed the signal to the main cargo bay. The doors were sealed, but Wren had already cracked the control panel and forced them open. The bay was enormous, and it was filled with children. Myra stopped in the doorway, her breath catching in her throat. Rows upon rows of suspension pods lined the walls, each one containing a small form, different species, different sizes, but all young. Some were humanoid, others were covered in fur or scales or something that looked like living stone, but every single one of them had the same expression frozen on their sleeping faces. Fear. This is a transport, Wren said, her voice hollow, a slave transport. Myra walked between the pods, her boots echoing in the silence. The children were alive. She could see the faint rise and fall of their chests, the pulse of the suspension fluids keeping them sedated, but their vital signs were weak, malnourished, some had old injuries that had never been treated. How many? She asked. 342, Wren said, give or take. I'm still counting. Myra closed her eyes. 342 children bound for some market, some auction block, some life of servitude or worse. This wasn't salvage, this was a crime scene. She opened her eyes and looked at Wren. We're taking them home. Captain, I said we're taking them home, every single one. Get the engineering team working on the suspension systems. I want these pods transferred to the horizon within the hour. Wren hesitated. The Vithari are going to come looking for this shipment. You know that. Myra turned back to the children, one of them a small, fragile thing with 6 delicate limbs and eyes that fluttered behind closed lids, looked no older than 5 standard years. Let them come, Myra said. I want to have a word with whoever thought this was acceptable. She pulled out her comm and opened a channel to the far horizon. Navigation, set a course for Earth. Maximum speed, and send a priority message to the Council. Tell them we're bringing cargo. Tell them they need to see it to believe it. She looked at the children one more time. The fear on their faces was etched deep. Even in sleep, some things could not be undone, but some things could be stopped. Wake them up, she told Wren. Carefully, I want them to know they're safe. I want them to see human faces before anything else. Wren nodded and moved to the nearest pod, her hands gentle on the controls. The suspension fluid began to drain, and the child inside stirred. Myra watched, her jaw tight, her pulse steady. She had found a ship full of stolen children, and she had just declared war on the most powerful criminal empire in the galaxy. But as the first child opened their eyes and looked at her with confusion and terror and a fragile, trembling hope, Myra Veals knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would burn the entire galaxy to ashes before she let anyone put them back in chains. The children arrived on Earth in the middle of a storm. Rain lashed the landing field as the transport shuttles descended, their hulls slick with moisture, their cargo bays filled with the silent weight of 342 young lives. Myra Veals stood at the base of the landing pad, her coat plastered to her shoulders, watching the first shuttle touch down with a hiss of hydraulic pressure. She had not slept in 48 hours. She didn't plan to sleep for another 48. The facility was a converted military installation buried in the mountains of what used to be the Canadian wilderness. It had been chosen for its isolation, its security, and its ability to disappear from satellite imagery if necessary. The Council had moved fast, faster than Myra expected, and within hours of her priority message, the entire operation had been classified at the highest level. Now the children were here, and the real work was about to begin. The first shuttle's ramp lowered, and a team of xenobiologists and medical personnel rushed forward, their faces set in grim determination. They had been briefed on the situation. They knew what they were about to see. But knowing and seeing were two different things. Myra watched as the first pod was carried out, a small avian creature with feathers matted and dull, its eyes wide and unblinking. It clutched a piece of fabric to its chest, some remnant of whatever life it had known before. The medic spoke to it in soft tones, offering water, offering warmth. It didn't respond, it just stared. Captain Veals. Myra turned to find Director Helena. Cross approaching, her heels clicking against the wet tarmac. Cross was a tall woman with gray, streaked hair and eyes that had seen too much and forgot nothing. She was the Council's designated representative for this operation, and she had made it clear from the start that she was not interested in politics. She was interested in results. How many? Cross asked, falling into step beside Myra. 342, all accounted for, all alive. Cross nodded slowly, and the Vithari, still unaware as far as we can tell. The freighter's transponder is offline. Their tracking systems are designed to monitor cargo, not life signs. We have time. Time for what? Myra stopped walking. She turned to face Cross directly, the rain streaming down her face. Time to figure out what we're going to do with them. Time to decide if we're going to hide or fight. Cross's expression didn't change. You sound like you've already made your choice. I have, I'm just not sure the Council has. They walked in silence for a moment, past the rows of pods being unloaded, past the medical teams working with quiet efficiency. Inside the facility, the atmosphere was different, warmer, brighter, filled with the sound of voices and the hum of equipment. The children were being processed, their vitals checked, their injuries treated. Some were crying, some were silent, some were already beginning to ask questions. Myra watched them as she passed. She saw fear in their eyes, yes, but she also saw something else, something that made her chest ache with a fierce protective anger. She saw children, just children. Director, I need you to understand something, Myra said, her voice low. The Vithari Syndicate doesn't just traffic in slaves, they traffic in children, the most vulnerable, the most defenseless. They take them from their homes, their families, their futures, and they sell them to the highest bidder. This isn't commerce, this is evil. Cross's eyes flickered. I'm aware of the situation, Captain. Then you're aware that the galactic community has known about this for centuries. They've done nothing. Vithari are too powerful, too connected. The Council of Worlds has a standing policy of non-interference. They don't touch the slave trade. They pretend it doesn't exist. Cross stopped walking. She turned to face Myra with an expression that was impossible to read. What are you suggesting? Myra met her gaze. I'm suggesting that Earth is not the Council of Worlds. We're not part of their system. We don't play by their rules. No, Cross said quietly, we don't. And for the first time, Myra saw something in the director's eyes that made her believe. Cross turned and walked toward the main observation room, her steps steady and deliberate. Myra followed, her pulse quickening. Inside the observation room, a bank of monitors displayed the children in real time, medical bays, sleeping quarters, the common area where volunteers were attempting to comfort the youngest ones. Cross stood at the center of the room, her hands clasped behind her back. Captain Veals, what you've done is unprecedented, Cross said. You found a Vithari slave ship. You took it. You brought its cargo to Earth. You have effectively declared war on the most powerful criminal syndicate in known space, and you did it without authorization. Myra felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Director, Let me finish. Cross turned to face her. You did it without authorization. You did it without a plan. You did it because it was the right thing to do. She paused, her gaze softening. I've been in this business for 30 years. Captain, I've seen a lot of people do a lot of things for a lot of reasons, but I've never seen anyone do what you did. Not like this. Myra didn't speak. She didn't trust her voice. Cross walked to the window that looked out over the facility below. The council convened an emergency session 3 hours ago. They are, as you might imagine, panicking. The Vithari are going to come looking for their cargo. They're going to find Earth, and when they do, they're going to demand answers, and if they don't get answers, they're going to demand blood. Then we give them answers, Myra said. And if they want blood, we give them that too. Cross looked at her for a long moment. Then she smiled, a thin, dangerous smile. That's exactly what I told the council. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small data chip. This is a full briefing on the Vithari Syndicate, their structure, their territory, their weaknesses. It's not complete. We've been gathering intelligence for years, but we've never had a reason to use it. Until now, Myra said. Until now. Cross handed her the chip. You're going to need a lot more than a freighter and a good heart to fight this war, Captain. You're going to need allies, you're going to need resources, and you're going to need a plan. Myra took the chip, her fingers closed around it like it was a lifeline. I'll start working on it immediately, she said. I know you will. Cross turned back to the window. And Captain, yes, don't fail these children. They've been failed enough. Myra looked down at the chip in her hand, then she looked at the monitors, at the faces of the children who were now impossibly, miraculously under Earth's protection. Director, she said, her voice steady, I have no intention of failing anyone. The Vithari warship arrived on the third day. It emerged from a rift in space-time that humans didn't even know existed. Tear in the fabric of reality that let ships travel distances that would take conventional drive hundreds of years. The rift was brief, barely lasting a second, but it was enough. One moment the space above Earth was empty. The next, a ship the size of a small city hung in orbit like a dark promise. Myra was in the command center when the alarms blared. She watched the display with a calm that surprised even her, a calm born not of confidence but of acceptance. She had known this was coming, she had prepared for it. But knowing and seeing were two different things. The Vithari ship was a masterpiece of intimidation, all sharp angles and dark plating, its hull covered in symbols that humans couldn't read but could feel. It radiated power like a furnace, radiated heat, its weapons bristling from every surface, its presence overwhelming. And then the message came. This is Thrax of the Vithari Syndicate. You have stolen property belonging to my organization. You will return it immediately. You will pay reparations for the damage to our vessel. You will submit to a full inspection of your world and its capabilities. Failure to comply will result in the complete annihilation of your species. The voice was smooth, cultured, and utterly devoid of emotion. It was the voice of someone who had delivered this ultimatum 1,000 times before, someone who had never been refused. Director Cross stood at the center of the command center, her face unreadable. They're not even trying to negotiate, she said quietly. They're just demanding. They always do, Myra replied. It's how they operate. They project strength. They overwhelm with fear, and they assume everyone will comply because no one has ever told them no. Until now. Cross turned to the communications officer. Open a channel. I want to speak to this Thrax. The officer hesitated. Director, we're not prepared for. Open the channel. The communications officer complied. The main display flickered, and the face of Thrax appeared, a lean, angular creature with skin the color of dried blood, eyes that glowed with a faint internal light. His features were sharp, predatory, designed to evoke fear. He looked at Cross with something that might have been amusement. You are the leader of this world. I am a representative, Cross said. I speak with the authority of Earth's Council. Then you will surrender the cargo now. Cross did not flinch. The children you refer to are not cargo. They are sentient beings. They are under our protection. Thrax's expression flickered, a micro-expression of annoyance that was gone as quickly as it appeared. You are a primitive species. You do not understand the galactic economy. You do not understand the consequences of your actions. I am offering you a chance to correct your mistake without bloodshed. Do not waste it. I understand perfectly, Cross said. You traffic in sentient life. You steal children from their families and sell them to the highest bidder. You have built an empire on suffering, and you expect us to participate in that evil. I expect you to survive. Cross smiled. It was not a kind smile. Then you don't know humans very well. Thrax paused for the first time. Something flickered in his glowing eyes. Uncertainty perhaps, or curiosity. You are interesting. Most species plead. They offer tribute. They beg for mercy. You are different. We are different, Cross agreed, and you will learn to respect that difference. Thrax studied her for a long moment. Then he said, I will give you 3 days, 3 days to consider my terms. At the end of that time, if you have not surrendered the cargo, I will begin orbital bombardment of your population centers. Your species will be reduced to ash and memory. He cut the connection. The command center fell into silence. The officers looked at each other, their faces pale, their hands trembling. They had just been threatened with extinction. They had just been told that everything they knew, everything they loved, everything they had built was about to be destroyed. But Cross did not tremble. She did not pale. She turned to Myra with the same unreadable expression and said, 3 days, that's not much time. 3 days is plenty, Myra replied, if we use them right. Cross nodded slowly. I hope you're right, Captain, because if you're wrong, we're all dead. Myra turned to leave the command center. Her mind already racing. She had 3 days to prepare, 3 days to gather intelligence, to build alliances, to forge a weapon that the Vithari had never seen. She had 3 days to save her world, and she had no intention of wasting a single second. The children were the key. Myra had known it from the moment she saw them in that cargo bay. They weren't just victims, they were witnesses. They were survivors. They were the only living beings who had seen the Vethari up close and lived to tell about it. And they were terrified. But terror could be transformed. Fear could be sharpened into a weapon. Myra spent her first day in the facility, moving from room to room, speaking to the children. Most of them couldn't speak. Her language, some of them couldn't speak at all, but they all understood. One thing, the look in her eyes when she told them they were safe. They had been waiting for that look their entire lives. At first they flinched when she approached, they covered their faces. They curled into small balls and refused to look at her. They had been taught that adults meant pain. They had been taught that obedience was the only path to survival. Myra didn't try to break that conditioning. She didn't lecture them about freedom or courage or the importance of fighting back. She just stayed. She sat on the floor. She waited. She let them come to her. And slowly, one by one, they did. The first was a small, fragile creature named Kavath. She had 6 limbs and eyes that changed color with her mood. Currently a deep, wounded blue. She approached Myra with the caution of a wild animal, her limbs trembling, her gaze fixed on the human's hands. "What are you afraid of?" Myra asked, her voice soft. Kavath didn't respond, but she did something else. She raised one of her limbs and drew a symbol in the air. A complex pattern of lines and angles seemed to pulse with meaning. Myra didn't understand the symbol, but she understood the fear that accompanied it. "Is that them?" she asked. "Is that what you're afraid of?" Kavath nodded. Then she drew the symbol again, more slowly, more deliberately, and then she drew a second symbol next to it, a different pattern, one that seemed almost hopeful. Myra called for a translator. She called for a xenobiologist. She called for anyone who could help her understand what Kavath was trying to say. It took 3 hours and 12 cups of coffee, but they finally figured it out. The first symbol was the Vithari. The second symbol was something else, something that Kavath's species had known for generations, a creature that hunted Vithari in the wild, a natural predator. Myra stared at the symbol, her mind racing. "The Vithari are afraid of something," she said slowly. "They're afraid of their own predators." "That's what the child is saying," the xenobiologist confirmed. "It's a biological warning pattern. The Vithari evolved with this creature. They learned to fear it. It's hardwired into their DNA." Myra looked at Kavath. The child was watching her with those changing eyes, her expression unreadable. "How do we use it?" Myra asked. "How do we make them afraid of us?" Kavath didn't answer. She didn't need to. The symbol said it all. Myra stood up, her pulse quickening. She had an idea, a crazy, impossible idea. And it just might work. Humanity's fleet did not attack. That was the first surprise. The Vithari had expected a desperate defense, fighters swarming missiles, launching the futile resistance of a primitive species trying to survive. They had seen it 100 times before. They knew how to crush it. But humanity did not attack. Instead, they broadcast a single image across every frequency. The symbol Kavath had drawn. Thrax stared at the image on his display, his glowing eyes widening. He knew that symbol. Every Vithari knew that symbol. It was etched into their genetic memory, a warning passed down through generations, a reminder of the thing that hunted them in the dark. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "What are they doing?" His advisors scrambled to answer. They had no idea. They had never seen anything like this. Then the second message arrived. Transmission from Earth broadcast on a loop. It was simple, it was direct, and it was devastating. "We have scouted your home world," message said. We know your breeding cycles, we know your vulnerabilities, we know where to strike, and we will. Thrax felt a chill run down his spine. It was impossible. Earth was a primitive world. They had no FTL capability. They had no galactic intelligence network. They couldn't possibly know. But the image was still there, that symbol, that terrible ancient symbol. Send a message to the home world. Thrax ordered, verify our defenses. I want to know. The communication officer interrupted him. Sir, we've lost contact with the home world. Lost contact. There's something happening. I'm receiving distress signals from multiple systems. The uprising. What uprising? The officer looked at him with wide eyes. The client species, sir. They're rebelling, all of them simultaneously. Thrax stared at the display, his mind racing. This was impossible. It was coordinated. It was planned, and it was happening. Right now, at the exact moment humanity had revealed its hand. He looked at the symbol on his display, and for the first time in his existence, he felt genuine terror. The siege of Vethar began with a whisper. Human strike forces, using stolen Vethari navigation codes, appeared in orbit above the Syndicate's home world. They did not bomb cities. They did not launch missiles. They simply broadcast a single message in every Vethari dialect. Your slaves are free. Your hunters are coming. Earth does not forgive. And then they waited. The Vethari leadership fractured. Some demanded immediate retaliation. Others argued for surrender, but none of them could agree on a course of action. Fear was too strong. The symbol was too powerful. And the uprisings were spreading. Across a dozen systems, the client species rose up. They had been told that Earth was coming. They had been told that the Vethari were vulnerable. They had been told that freedom was possible. And they believed. The Syndicate supply lines were severed. Their military forces were stretched thin. Their communication networks were flooded with messages of rebellion and defiance. And above Earth, the Vethari fleet waited for orders that would never come. Thrax sat in his command chair staring at the display. The image of the symbol was still there. He couldn't look away. What do we do? His advisor asked, his voice trembling. Thrax didn't answer. He didn't know how to answer. He had never been afraid before. He had never been uncertain. He had never faced an enemy that didn't follow the rules. But humans didn't follow the rules. They made their own. And they were winning. Thrax demanded to speak with Director Cross. The communication channel opened, and Cross appeared on the display. She looked the same as she had 3 days ago, unreadable, composed, utterly unafraid. You have caused us a great deal of trouble, Thrax said, his voice flat. But you have not won. Neither have you, Cross replied. Your home world is in chaos. Your supply lines are severed. Your empire is crumbling, and you are sitting in orbit above a world that has no intention of surrendering. Thrax was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "What do you want?" Cross smiled. "I want you to leave. I want you to take your fleet and your weapons and your fear, and I want you to leave Earth's solar system. Never return. Never threaten us again. And in return, I will allow you to live." Thrax stared at her. "You would spare us? After everything we've done?" "Spare you?" Cross's smile vanished. "No, Thrax, I'm not sparing you. I'm giving you a chance to run. a chance to rebuild, a chance to learn from your mistakes. But if you ever threaten Earth again, if you ever touch one of our people, if you ever even look at us the wrong way, we will come for you and we will not stop. Thrax felt the weight of her words. He knew with absolute certainty that she was telling the truth. Agreed, he said. We will leave. Good, Cross nodded. Oh, and Thrax. One more thing. What? Tell your people that Earth is watching. And we don't forgive. Months later, the children had found homes. They had been adopted by families across Earth, humans who had seen their faces on the news and felt a pull they couldn't explain. They were learning new languages, new customs, new ways of being. They were healing, and the galaxy was watching. The Vethari syndicate had collapsed. The uprising had succeeded. The client species were free, and Earth had become a symbol of resistance, of defiance, of the possibility of change. Myra Veal stood in the observation room, looking out at the facility below. The children were playing in the courtyard, their laughter echoing off the walls. She had done it. They had all done it. But she knew it wasn't over. The galaxy was full of evil. There were other syndicates, other threats, other horrors waiting to be uncovered. Earth had won battle, not a war. But it was a start. Director Cross appeared at her side. The Galactic Assembly is convening. She said they want to hear from us. They want to know what we did and how we did it. Myra nodded. And what are you going to tell them? Cross smiled. I'm going to tell them the truth, that we didn't win because we were strong. We won because we were angry. We won because we refused to accept the unacceptable. We won because we loved. Myra looked at the children again. They were laughing now, their faces bright with joy. That's enough, she said. That's always enough. Cross nodded. Yes, it is. And as the sun set over the facility, Myra Vils knew that the galaxy had changed forever, because Earth had found the slave children, and Earth had said no.